It's Saturday night once again. I could be out with a few friends right now, talking chess, rugs and sausage rolls, but no. Then I remembered we didn't yet cover this game, played 3 months ago in the tournament that gave us this reaction from Nepo with the white pieces is the now world number 2, Arjun Erigaisi, and with black, the one and only world number 1, Merlin Carmichael, the magician. What a game this is, absolutely flawless, stunning. It starts with d4, and one of the best things is that we see on the board a King's Indian defence from Magnus Carlsen, walking in the footsteps of other chess greats, Kasparov, Fischer, Frank. What an aggressive opening this is. So now we see bishop e2, standard development, and normally you castle here, not Magnus, loves a sideline, he pushes e5 already, and you've got to go d5 in response, surely, right? Or bishop e3, or knight f3. But what you don't do is take, which Arjun does, absolute madman, and then takes the queens off the board. Magnus's fans start bleating away. Don't they know he's the Endgame GOAT? One does not simply wander into this with Magnus and live to tell the tale. But Arjun's got other plans. He expands with f4 here, and if takes, his bishop comes streaming out into the game. So Magnus goes bishop e6 instead. If you capture this pawn, looks nice maybe to win a pawn, but knight d7, you're soon winning it back and you've compromised your structure. So instead knight f3, met by knight c6, both players making some quiet pony noises as the top grandmasters do, and after castles, Magnus goes for it by hand, allowing knight g5. He never pushed h6, but Arjun doesn't do it. You can then go knight d4 in response, different game, still quite good for white, but instead we see the absolutely stunning pawn push, f5 on the board.
And trust me, it's an absolute banger. It's a game changer.
Mushrooms.
Banger.
Mushrooms.
Banger.
Mushrooms.
Banger.
Lock. This is first what I do.
Yes, this one changing the game. And by the way, I really need some new edits. If you do enjoy that kind of thing, edits, pictures, anything like that, do feel free to email me over. I'd love to feature some in my videos. Now we crack on with the game again, because Magnus captures, pawn takes back here, and he's hitting that bishop and saying, okay, if you take, which is playable by the way, but not played, we've gone to the back cave, then the knight takes here and you open the rook. This is how the top line goes, knight d4, maybe Magnus missed some of these details, it is playable, but bishop g5 on the way, white should eventually get the pressure or even win a pawn, different game. So we didn't see this on the board. Magnus drops back, what a mouse, not taking up the gauntlet there, and after knight g5 he goes wrong, immediately punished, because bishop e8 is actually the best covering move. Then you kick away this knight, but Magnus goes rook f8 here, covering the pawn, but it's given the mistake. It's on a clumsy square. Now knight d5 playable, but instead bishop e3 stacks those clergymen, and something wicked this way comes. How do you fight against it? Well, Magnus goes knight d4, intercepting that bishop, and after bishop d3, coming away from the attack, but also covering this pawn, the game just explodes into a tactical mess, because h6 is played, the knight retreats to this amazing occupied square by all the white pieces, and now Magnus should take this pawn but with the bishop. This is the best line. Very complex though, because you're covering with the knight, but what happens if you eliminate the knight? About to win a piece. Well, this is the best line. We won't pause for every single possible move. This is the main way that Stock Barnacle plays, and when the smoke clears here, something like this, you know, well, white is slightly ahead. Preferred, but it's a game. It's a different one. We come back here because Magnus did not take with the bishop, he took with the knight. And the big problem with this move is now you can land this bishop c5 shot. You've opened up that diagonal, and the problem here, if you try and save the rook, is that this knight is double attacked, X-ray attacked here after you take on f6. too many tactical problems. So Magnus has to do this, allowing Arjun to then do this, and when the smoke clears, he's emerging up an exchange here. He's winning on the board, but he's playing the world number one. We know how resilient Magnus is, and look at this knight, centralized, can't be opposed unless you try and spin this one round, and this bishop is cementoing everything. So knight f6 is played, bishop d6 from Magnus, and now this is an absolute touch of class. We get king to h1. Who's really grinding like a grandma now in this complex, interesting endgame? c5 now played, cementos that knight in the centre of the board. b3 in response, king c7, and now this is one of my favourite moments. Bishop to e4, and unbeknownst to the players, a wild Sagar appears to observe the boards, no doubt thinking about how to make some stunning chess content for the Chess Base India channel. Meanwhile, over in the Fair Play office, Vlad the Implier makes his daily visit. Rumour has it a 1900 set up the Lucena position. No one under 2000 knows how to do that one. Now what do we see on the board here? Well, a5 from Magnus. Always makes you look cool if you push a rook's pawn. Bishop d5 comes on the board. a4, bishop takes here, and if you take with the knight, you keep the pawn structure intact, but then this knight retreats and you've got all sorts of hanging pawns and problems. So this is actually the best move, even though you give yourself a structure that only a mother could love. And now Arjun really does show his class here, because there's a threat to take on b3, win a pawn, right, but he doesn't go rook b1, responding like that. He goes knight e4, playing with this absolute energy, because after takes, he then invades with the rook here, even though he's given the pawn. The knight hops back, covering e6. This one's won, and Arjun's got two past juices of his own that he wants to start pushing. So king c6, h4 played, bishop e7 from Magnus, keeping an eye on some key squares, h5 and b5. This is thematic. He wants to get his passer going. So he goes king d5, doesn't even take this pawn, hits the knight, supports the c4 square, but in response, does Arjun flinch? No, he pushes on with b6 here, c4's played, exploding the board, and after rook h7, hitting the bishop, bishop b4, again, Arjun just doesn't play the obvious move, which is rook b1, right? Save it, hit the bishop. No, he flicks in this b7. I mean, seeing this game, it's really hitting home how good this guy is at chess. He's simply playing incredible moves, incredible chess. Magnus Carlsen-esque, because now he still doesn't move the rook. He checks the king, it moves to c6 here, and now he plays rook b1, having improved two of his pieces in the meantime. Bishop d2 now played, red carpet rolled out for the c-pawn. How many times have we seen Magnus bring these kind of games back? But not Arjun to be worried here. He goes knight d7, hits the rook on b8, and if you keep pushing this pawn, well, this is the problem. You take with check, and you make the queen, so even though this one gets to c2, you cover in time, and this rook's obviously covering the square. So that's why we see the rook capture here. But now you backpedal with check. The rook drops off the board. Arjun a double exchange ahead now, but the c-pawn dangerous. He brings this rook over, clearing the way for this one to run. c3 played, they're scrambling on seconds. Now we see this one pushed by Magnus, but it forces, or Arjun, sorry, but it forces Magnus to now give up an exchange of prisoners, because this one drops when he captures on h6. He had to stop it running. But look at this endgame now. Double exchange ahead. Arjun bossing Magnus's pieces, pushing them around, and after this move of rook f7, cutting the king off, he starts running this g-pawn. It's ominous. The writing's on the wall. Check played, king h3, and here Magnus resigns the game. This is pushing, so you actually have to give up a bishop, and this is just hopelessly lost. You know, sample line, clicking around here, you lose a knight. Say the knight instead comes this way, this kind of thing. Somehow, one way or another, you always box the king around, start bossing it, pick up the pieces. It's just hopelessly lost. This is the final position, and if you want to see the truly remarkable game from this tournament that caused Nepo's reaction, then have a look at the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.